Have you ever been offered something that sounded like a dream but came with a price you weren't sure you could pay? Today, I'm going to tell you the unforgettable story of Emma Clark, a struggling marketing coordinator who thought accepting her billionaire boss's proposal to fake a Christmas romance would be simple. But when Alexander Winters revealed his one shocking condition, everything she thought she knew about herself, about him, and about what she truly wanted was about to change forever. The late November wind bit through Emma Clark's wool coat as she hurried across the plaza toward Winters' global headquarters. At 26, she'd grown accustomed to the brutal New York winters, but this morning felt especially unforgiving. She clutched her coffee like a lifeline, steam rising into the gray pre-dawn air as her worn boots clicked against frozen pavement. The 50-story glass tower loomed ahead, its sleek facade reflecting the city's awakening lights. Emma pushed through the revolving doors into the marble lobby, grateful for the blast of heated air that greeted her. Security nodded as she swiped her badge, the familiar beep granting her access to the elevators. She rode to the 32nd floor, watching the city shrink below through the glass walls. This view never got old, no matter how many times she made this journey. The marketing department was already buzzing when she arrived. Desks stretched in neat rows beneath modern pendant lighting, each workspace a careful arrangement of monitors, plants, and personal touches that made the corporate environment feel almost human. Emma's desk sat near the windows, a coveted spot she'd earned after 2 years of 60-hour weeks and campaigns that had exceeded every projection. "Morning, Emma," called Jessica from the neighboring cubicle, her blonde ponytail bouncing as she leaned over the partition. "Did you see the email? Emergency all-hands meeting at 9. What do you think that's about?" Emma shrugged out of her coat, draping it over her chair. "No idea. Budget cuts. New product launch." She powered on her computer, already mentally reviewing her current projects. Whatever the meeting concerned, she needed to be prepared. "Or maybe Mr. Winters is finally getting married," Jessica giggled, though her eyes held a dreamy quality. "Can you imagine? Alexander Winters off the market. Every socialite in Manhattan would go into mourning." Emma rolled her eyes, though she couldn't suppress a small smile. Alexander Winters, the 34-year-old CEO of Winters Global, was indeed the subject of endless speculation. Forbes called him the Ice King of Tech for his cool demeanor and ruthless business strategies. Tabloids photographed him at charity galas with a rotating cast of supermodels and heiresses, none lasting more than a few months. He was brilliant, demanding, impossibly wealthy, and Emma had to admit during her more honest moments, devastatingly handsome. Not that it mattered. In 2 years at Winters Global, Emma had been in the same room as Alexander Winters exactly 4 times, always during large presentations. He'd never spoken directly to her. Men like him existed in a different stratosphere, one where private jets and penthouse apartments were normal, where a woman like Emma, with her student loans and cramped studio apartment in Queens, barely registered as human. "Earth to Emma," Jessica waved a hand in front of her face. "You zoned out thinking about Mr. Winters." "Absolutely not," Emma replied quickly, perhaps too quickly based on Jessica's knowing grin. "I was thinking about the Caldwell campaign. We need to finalize the media buy by Friday." "Sure you were." Jessica winked before disappearing back to her side of the partition. Emma tried to focus on her email, but restlessness crawled beneath her skin. Emergency meetings were never good news. She'd seen too many colleagues escorted out with cardboard boxes after similar announcements. The tech industry was ruthless, and despite Winters Global's success, nothing was guaranteed. At precisely 9 o'clock, the marketing team filed into the large conference room on the 35th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, the morning sun finally breaking through the clouds to cast golden light across the skyline. Emma took a seat midway down the long table, smoothing her navy pencil skirt and straightening the collar of her white blouse. Professional armor for whatever was coming. The door opened, and conversation died instantly. Alexander Winters entered with the casual confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to command any room. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent, the crisp white shirt beneath open at the collar in a way that managed to look both relaxed and utterly powerful. His dark hair was perfectly styled, though one strand fell rebelliously across his forehead. Sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw gave him an almost aristocratic appearance, but it was his eyes, steel gray and penetratingly intelligent, that made Emma's breath catch. She'd seen him from a distance, obviously, but never this close. Never close enough to notice the faint scar above his left eyebrow, or the way his presence seemed to charge the very air with intensity. Behind him walked Margaret Chen, the chief marketing officer, her expression carefully neutral. Whatever news was coming, even Margaret seemed uncertain about it. "Good morning," Alexander said, his voice a rich baritone that carried effortlessly through the room. No microphone needed. "Thank you for gathering on short notice." He moved to the head of the table with economical grace, hands sliding into his pockets as he surveyed the assembled team. His gaze swept across the faces, lingering briefly on each person. When those gray eyes reached Emma, she felt the impact like a physical touch. For half a second, their eyes locked. Then his attention moved on, leaving her slightly breathless and annoyed with herself for the reaction. "I'll be direct," Alexander continued. "Winters Global has been approached by Nakamura Technologies about a potential partnership. If successful, this deal would expand our reach into the Asian market and position us as the dominant player in cloud infrastructure globally." Excited murmurs rippled through the room. This was massive news. Nakamura Technologies was legendary in Japan, a family-run corporation with traditional values and an impeccable reputation. However, Alexander's voice cut through the whispers like a blade, there's a complication. Hideo Nakamura, the patriarch who controls final approval, is extremely traditional. Family values, legacy, stability, these matter to him as much as profit margins, perhaps more. Margaret stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Mr. Nakamura has expressed concerns about Mr. Winters's personal life, specifically his lack of a committed relationship. In Japanese business culture, particularly for a man of Mr. Winters's age and position, being unmarried raises questions about stability and judgment." Emma felt her eyebrows rise. This was unprecedented. What did Alexander Winters's dating life have to do with a business deal? As if reading the room's confusion, Alexander's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I know how it sounds. In an ideal world, my relationship status would be irrelevant. Unfortunately, we don't operate in an ideal world. We operate in the one where a $50 billion deal hinges on whether Hideo Nakamura believes I'm settled enough to be a reliable long-term partner. The Nakamura family is hosting their annual Christmas celebration at their estate in the Hamptons," Margaret continued. "It's a week-long event from December 20th through the 27th. They've invited Mr. Winters and, quote, his significant other." "Which brings me to why you're all here," Alexander said, his gaze sweeping the room again. "I need someone from this team to accompany me to the Nakamura Christmas celebration. Someone intelligent, poised, and capable of convincing a very shrewd old man that she's my devoted girlfriend." The silence that followed was absolute. Emma's mind reeled. He was asking someone to fake a relationship for a week over Christmas. "To be clear," Alexander continued, his tone becoming more businesslike, "this would be a professional arrangement. Compensation will be substantial, a $50,000 bonus paid upon successful completion. You would stay in one of the guest houses on the Nakamura estate. Separate sleeping arrangements, naturally. Your role would be to attend social functions, be pleasant company, and help present the image of a stable, committed relationship." Emma's heart hammered. $50,000. That was more than she made in a year after taxes. That was her student loans, her credit card debt, and enough left over to maybe, finally, visit her sister in California. It was life-changing money. But Christmas, the week she was supposed to spend with her family in Boston, her mother would be devastated. Around the table, she could see the same calculation happening in other minds. Jessica's eyes had gone wide, her lips parted in barely concealed excitement. Several other women sat straighter, hands smoothing hair, adjusting jewelry. "Before anyone volunteers," Alexander said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "understand that this requires complete commitment. The Nakamuras are not fools. They'll be watching, evaluating, judging every interaction. If you can't sell this convincingly, the deal collapses and Winters Global loses an extraordinary opportunity. He paused, letting that sink in. Additionally, there is one non-negotiable condition that my potential partner must accept. Emma leaned forward slightly. Here it was, the catch. There was always a catch. Alexander's gray eyes swept the room one final time. Once the week concludes, regardless of the outcome, we will part ways. No expectations of a continued relationship, professional advancement based on this arrangement, or any form of personal entanglement. What happens during that week stays in that context. When it's over, completely. His voice had gone cold on the last word, and Emma shivered despite the room's warmth. He was making it abundantly clear that this was purely transactional. No pretty woman fantasies. No romantic complications. Furthermore, he continued, each word carefully enunciated, you will be required to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. Nothing about this arrangement can ever be revealed to anyone outside this room. Not friends, not family, not future employers. The NDA includes substantial financial penalties for any breach. Emma's stomach twisted, so she'd have to lie to her family about why she wasn't coming home for Christmas, lie about where she was and who she was with, and then carry that secret forever. If those terms are acceptable, Alexander said, and you're interested in this opportunity, please submit your name to Margaret by 5 o'clock today. I'll make my selection by tomorrow morning. Thank you for your time. He turned to leave, Margaret following, and the moment the door closed behind them, the conference room erupted into chaos. Did that really just happen? $50,000? A week in the Hamptons with Alexander Winters? Are you kidding? Jessica grabbed Emma's arm, her grip almost painful. You have to volunteer. Emma, this is perfect for you. You're smart, you're beautiful when you actually try, and you need the money. I can't, Emma said automatically. Christmas is next month, my family. Your family will understand, Jessica insisted. This is your career. This is $50,000. When are you going to get another chance like this? Emma stood abruptly, needing space to think. She mumbled something about needing coffee and fled the conference room before anyone else could offer opinions she didn't want to hear. The break room was mercifully empty. Emma poured herself a cup of the mediocre office coffee and leaned against the counter, mind spinning. $50,000. A week pretending to be Alexander Winters's girlfriend. Lying to her family. Signing away her right to ever speak about it. And that condition, that cold, final declaration that when it ended, it would end completely. No messy feelings, no expectations. Why did that bother her? It was sensible, professional, exactly what an arrangement like this should be. Maybe that was the problem. It was so calculated, so devoid of any warmth. It reduced human connection to a contract, romance to a performance. And yet, wasn't that exactly what she'd be signing up for? A performance. Not a fan of chaos. Emma spun around, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of her cup. Alexander Winters stood in the doorway of the break room, one shoulder leaning against the frame, hands in his pockets. Up close, in the less formal setting, he looked younger somehow. Still devastatingly attractive, but more human. Mr. Winters, Emma stammered, setting her coffee down before she spilled it. I didn't hear you come in. Alexander, he corrected, moving into the room with that same fluid grace. If we're going to be working together, formality seems excessive. I haven't volunteered, Emma pointed out, proud when her voice came out steady. No, he agreed, those gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But you're considering it. It wasn't a question. Emma crossed her arms defensively. What makes you so sure? Because you're still here instead of rushing back to tell your colleagues all the reasons you couldn't possibly do it. He moved to the coffee pot, pouring himself a cup with movements that suggested he didn't often make his own coffee. The domesticity of it was oddly jarring. I'm considering it, Emma admitted, but I have questions. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. He turned to face her, hip against the counter, mirroring her posture. Ask. Emma took a breath, organizing her thoughts. Why someone from marketing? Wouldn't it make more sense to hire an actress, someone trained to play a part? I thought about that, Alexander said, sipping his coffee and grimacing slightly at the taste. But actresses are recognizable. Their agents talk. The risk of exposure was too high. I needed someone intelligent enough to handle unexpected questions, professional enough to take this seriously, and unknown enough that no one would dig into the backstory. And that $50,000 bonus is enough to ensure loyalty. The bonus is compensation for your time and the inconvenience of spending Christmas away from your family, he corrected. Loyalty is ensured by the NDA and the understanding that betraying my trust would end your career in this industry. Permanently. The threat was delivered calmly, almost conversationally, but Emma didn't doubt he meant every word. Alexander Winters hadn't built a tech empire by being forgiving. What exactly would this entail? Emma asked. Day to day, I mean, what would I have to do? Alexander set down his coffee cup. The Nakamuras host various events throughout the week. Dinners, a traditional tea ceremony, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day celebrations, a New Year's planning gathering. We'd need to attend these together, present a united front. Casual affection would be expected. Holding hands, perhaps an arm around your waist. Nothing inappropriate, but enough to appear genuinely connected. Heat crept up Emma's neck at the thought of Alexander's arm around her waist, his hand in hers. She pushed the image away, focusing on the practical. And at night, you said separate accommodations. The estate has multiple guest houses. You'd have your own space, privacy when you need it. His eyes held hers. I'm asking you to pretend to be my girlfriend, Emma, not to actually be intimate with me. I hope that's clear. Her name in his voice sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. This was the first time he'd used it, and the casual familiarity felt both strange and oddly thrilling. Why me? The question escaped before she could stop it. You don't even know me. We've never had a conversation before today. Alexander's expression shifted, something flickering across his face too quickly to identify. I've seen your work. The Caldwell campaign was innovative. The Henderson pitch was flawless. You're creative, articulate, and you don't crack under pressure. Those qualities matter for something like this. You've been watching my work. Emma couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. I pay attention to talented people in my company, he said simply. It's good business. The way he said it made her feel seen in a way she hadn't expected, not as just another employee, but as someone whose contributions had been noticed. By him. And there's something else, Alexander continued, his voice lowering slightly. You have a quality of genuineness. When you smile, it reaches your eyes. When you're concentrating, you bite your lower lip. These small authenticity markers are what sell a performance like this. People believe you because you're believable. Emma's hand unconsciously moved to her lip, a gesture that made Alexander's mouth curve in that almost smile again. See, you didn't even know you did that. Warmth flooded her cheeks. He'd been watching her that closely, noticing details like how she bit her lip. The condition, Emma said, steering the conversation back to safer ground. The one about ending completely when the week is over. Why include that? For the first time, Alexander's expression closed off, a shudder dropping behind his eyes. Because mixing business and personal relationships is a complication I don't allow in my life. This arrangement has clear parameters. We both go in knowing exactly what it is and what it is. When it's over, we return to our respective roles. Clean, simple, no misunderstandings. You make it sound like there's risk of misunderstanding, Emma observed. There's always risk when boundaries blur. His voice had gone cool again, that CEO distance reasserting itself. I'm being explicit to protect both of us. You get the bonus. I get the partnership. We both walk away without complications. Emma studied him, this brilliant, powerful man who'd reduced human connection to a business transaction. There was something almost sad about it, a loneliness lurking beneath the polish. You don't believe people can separate performance from feeling, she guessed. Alexander's jaw tightened. I believe people confuse proximity and pretense for connection. Spending a week playing a couple, sharing intimate moments, even staged ones, creates a false sense of relationship. The condition exists to prevent that confusion. For me or for you? The question hung between them, sharp and challenging. For a moment, Emma thought she'd gone too far, crossed a line with her boss she could never uncross. Then Alexander smiled. A real smile, small but genuine, that transformed his entire face. Smart question, he said. Maybe both. Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it quickly. A text from her mother about Christmas dinner plans, asking if Emma wanted turkey or ham this year. Guilt twisted in her stomach. If she did this, she'd miss Christmas with her family for the first time in her life. She'd have to lie to her mother about why. Carry that deception through every phone call, every future visit. But $50,000, and a chance to work directly with Alexander Winters to prove herself at the highest level. I need to think about it, Emma said quietly. Alexander nodded, pushing off from the counter. Of course, Margaret expects responses by 5. Whatever you decide, Emma, there's no wrong choice, only the one that's right for you. He moved toward the door, then paused, glancing back. For what it's worth, I hope you say yes. Then he was gone, leaving Emma alone with her cold coffee and her racing thoughts. Emma made it until 3 o'clock before she texted her sister, Claire. Need advice? Call when you can. Claire called immediately. She always did. 6 years older and infinitely wiser, Claire had been Emma's anchor since their father died when Emma was 15. What's wrong? Claire demanded without preamble. Are you okay? Is it work? I'm fine, Emma assured her, closing her office door for privacy. It's definitely work, but I'm fine. I just need your perspective on something. She explained the situation, carefully leaving out Alexander's name and any identifying details that might breach the NDA she hadn't even signed yet. When she finished, silence stretched on the other end of the line. Claire, you still there? I'm here, I'm just processing. A pause. This is insane, Em, you know that, right? This is a completely insane situation. I know. And you're actually considering it. I am. Emma leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. $50,000, Claire. Do you know what that could do for me? I could be out of debt. I could finally breathe. What about Christmas? Mom will be devastated. The guilt knife twisted deeper. I know, but this is my career. This is an opportunity I might never get again. Or it's a disaster waiting to happen, Claire countered. Emma pretending to be someone's girlfriend for a week. That's not normal. That's not professional. And this condition about walking away clean, that's a red flag the size of Texas. Why? Emma sat up, defensive now. It's setting clear boundaries, that's healthy. It's preemptive emotional amputation, Claire said bluntly. He's so scared of something real developing that he's making you agree in advance not to have feelings. That's not healthy. That's trauma. Emma was quiet, absorbing that. She'd thought the same thing earlier, but hearing it from Claire made it more real. Maybe he's just practical, Emma offered weakly. Maybe he's scared, Claire corrected. And here's the thing, little sister, you're not good at separating feelings from situations. You get attached. You care too much. You feel things deeply. So spending a week playing house with some billionaire who's already set the terms for your disposal, that's a recipe for you getting hurt. I'm not 16 anymore, Claire. I can handle this professionally. Can you? Claire's voice softened. Can you really spend a week being affectionate with someone, looking into their eyes, holding their hand, pretending to care about them, and not develop actual feelings, especially if he's even remotely charming? Emma thought about Alexander's smile in the break room, the way he'd noticed details about her she didn't know she projected, the intensity in his eyes when he looked at her. I'm a professional, she said instead of answering directly. I can compartmentalize. Claire sighed. I love you, Emma, and I support whatever you decide, but promise me something. What? Promise me you'll be honest with yourself, about what you're feeling, about what this really is. Don't lie to yourself just because the money is good or the guy is attractive. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with the consequences. After they hung up, Emma sat in her office as the afternoon light faded, turning the city outside her window into a canvas of shadow and neon. Claire's warning echoed in her mind, but so did the memory of Alexander's almost smile and the way he'd said, "I hope you say yes." At 4:47 p.m., Emma walked to Margaret Chen's office and told her assistant she'd like to volunteer for the project. At 4:52 p.m., she received an email from Alexander Winters's executive assistant scheduling a meeting in his office at 7 the following morning to discuss details and sign the necessary agreements. At 6:15 p.m., Emma called her mother and lied for the first time she could remember, saying that a major client emergency required her to work through Christmas and she wouldn't be able to make it home. Her mother's disappointment cut deeper than she'd expected, but Emma promised to visit in January and sent an expensive gift basket as penance. At 11:30 p.m., lying in her small studio apartment, Emma stared at the ceiling and wondered what the hell she'd just gotten herself into. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Alexander Winters stared at an email from Margaret with a single line, "Emma Clark has accepted," and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope and fear in equal measure. The next morning, Emma arrived at Winters' global headquarters at 6:45 a.m., determined to be early for her 7 o'clock meeting with Alexander. She de-agonized over her outfit, finally settling on a tailored black suit with a silk blouse, professional enough for a business meeting but with enough polish to suggest she could handle high-society events. Her hair was swept into a neat bun, makeup subtle but polished, the armor of a woman preparing for battle. The executive floor was eerily quiet at this hour, the usual bustle of assistants and meetings not yet begun. Emma's heels clicked against marble as she approached Alexander's corner office, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan awakening in the early light. His executive assistant, a stylish woman in her 50s named Patricia, greeted Emma with a knowing smile. "Ms. Clark, Mr. Winters is expecting you. Go right in." Emma knocked once, heard a deep enter, and pushed open the heavy door. Alexander's office was exactly what she'd expected, sophisticated, modern, expensive. Dark wood furniture, leather seating, abstract art that probably cost more than her apartment. But what surprised her was the personal touches. A vintage record player in one corner, actual vinyl records lined up beside it. Black and white photographs of architecture from around the world. A chess set mid-game on a side table. Alexander stood by the windows, phone to his ear, speaking in what sounded like flawless Japanese. He gestured for Emma to sit, finishing his conversation with what sounded like polite farewells before ending the call. "Nakamura-san sends his regards," Alexander said by way of greeting, moving behind his desk. He wore a navy suit today, no tie, top button undone in that casually powerful way he had. His hair looked slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered, and Emma caught the faint scent of expensive cologne as he passed. "You speak Japanese?" Emma tried not to sound impressed and failed. "5 languages fluently, 3 more conversationally," he said without arrogance, simply stating fact. "It's necessary in my position, though my Japanese still needs work, according to Hideo. He's brutally honest about such things." He opened a folder on his desk, sliding it across to Emma. "The NDA, review it carefully, ask any questions you need." Emma took the document, scanning the dense legal language. It was comprehensive, as promised. Confidentiality extending in perpetuity, financial penalties for any breach substantial enough to bankrupt her twice over, explicit language about the nature of the arrangement and the expectations of both parties. "There's a clause here about maintaining the illusion for 6 months after the event," Emma noted. "What does that mean?" "If the Nakamuras ask about our relationship in follow-up communications, we maintain consistency," Alexander explained. "We can't immediately break up the day after Christmas. It would raise suspicion. So for 6 months, if asked, we're still together. After that, we had an amicable parting. No drama, just schedules and priorities changing. So I have to lie for 6 months, not just 1 week." "You have to be consistent for 6 months," Alexander corrected. "There's a difference. The Nakamuras are unlikely to ask personal questions frequently. You're not lying actively. You're simply not contradicting the established narrative if it comes up. Emma continued reading, noting clauses about expected behavior, presentation standards, and contingency plans for various scenarios. It was thorough to the point of being clinical. This section, she pointed to a paragraph near the end, it says I agree to follow your lead in all social situations and defer to your judgment on appropriate responses. That's pretty vague. What does it actually mean? Alexander leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. The Nakamura's world has specific rules. I know those rules. You don't. If I suggest we leave a conversation, we leave. If I redirect a topic, you follow. If I make a decision about our schedule, you trust it. I'm not being controlling. I'm navigating a culture and business dynamic you're not familiar with. So I'm supposed to be a silent accessory. You're supposed to be smart enough to recognize when you're in waters over your head and trust the person who knows how to swim. His eyes held hers, not challenging but assessing. Can you do that? Can you trust me? It was a loaded question. Could she trust a man she barely knew, in a situation that was already so far outside normal it might as well be science fiction? But something in his gaze steadied her. This wasn't about control. It was about competence. He was good at this world and she needed to let him lead. I can trust your expertise, Emma said carefully, as long as you respect my intelligence. I wouldn't have chosen you if I didn't respect your intelligence. He pulled another document from his desk. The compensation agreement. $50,000 paid in 2 installments. $25,000 immediately upon signing, the remainder within 48 hours of our return from the Hamptons, contingent on successful completion of the arrangement. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she took the paper. $50,000, real, official, about to be hers. There's also an expense account, Alexander continued. Wardrobe, travel necessities, anything you need for the week. Patricia will coordinate with you on selections. You'll need cocktail attire, formal gowns, casual sophistication. The Nakamuras dress well, and you'll need to meet that standard. Basically a makeover, Emma said, trying to keep the edge from her voice. Basically ensuring you have the tools to do the job I'm hiring you for, Alexander corrected. Emma, if I needed someone to rebuild a car engine, I'd make sure they had the right tools. This is no different. It's not about changing who you are. It's about equipping you for the role. He stood, moving to the window, hands in his pockets, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his thinking posture. I need to know you understand what you're agreeing to, he said, voice quieter now. Not just the NDAs and the logistics. The reality of it. We'll be in close quarters for a week. We'll need to present a convincing portrait of a couple in love. That means I'll touch you, hold your hand, put my arm around you, stand close enough that you'll feel my breath, look at you in ways that suggest intimacy. Heat crept up Emma's neck as images flooded her mind. His hand in hers, his arm around her waist, his eyes on her face with that same intensity he was using now. I understand, she managed. Do you? He turned back to face her. Because here's what I need to know, Emma. Will you be able to separate the performance from reality? Because that's what this is, a performance. I'm not developing real feelings for you during this week, and you're not developing them for me. We play our parts, we get what we need, and we walk away. Can you do that? There it was again, that preemptive distance, that insistence on emotional separation. You seem very concerned about feelings developing, Emma observed. Has that been a problem for you before? No, Alexander said, perhaps too quickly. I've simply learned that clear boundaries prevent misunderstandings. I'm not interested in a relationship, Emma, not a real one. My life doesn't have space for that kind of complication. Why not? The question seemed to surprise him. Why does it matter? Because I'm agreeing to play the role of someone you'd actually date, Emma said, standing to face him across the desk. It might help to understand why you don't date, what I'm supposed to be selling as your girlfriend. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was deciding how much to reveal. I don't date seriously because relationships require vulnerability I'm not willing to give, he finally said. They require trust that can be weaponized. My last serious relationship ended when I discovered the woman I thought loved me was actually feeding corporate intelligence to a competitor. She'd been using our relationship for over a year to position herself and her real boyfriend for a substantial windfall. Emma's stomach turned. That's awful, I'm sorry. Don't be, it taught me a valuable lesson. Keep business and personal separate. Never give someone close enough access to destroy you. His voice had gone flat, carefully devoid of emotion. So when I say I'm not developing feelings during this arrangement, I mean it. It's not cruelty, it's self-preservation. Emma understood then. The condition wasn't about protecting her from getting hurt. It was about protecting him. This brilliant, powerful man had been so deeply betrayed that he'd built walls even his fake girlfriend couldn't breach. I won't betray you, Emma said softly. The terms of our agreement are clear. I'm not interested in corporate espionage or taking advantage of your trust. I know, that's why I chose you. He moved back to his desk, picking up a pen. So, can you do this? Can you play the part convincingly without losing sight of what this is? Emma thought about Claire's warning, about her tendency to catch feelings, about the very real risk that spending a week with this complex, damaged, fascinating man might do exactly what he was afraid of. But she also thought about $50,000, about her career, about proving to herself that she could be professional even in the most unprofessional of situations. I can do it, Emma said, meeting his eyes squarely. Then we have an agreement. Alexander offered his hand across the desk, formal and businesslike. Emma took it, his palm warm and strong against hers, and tried to ignore the electric current that shot up her arm at the contact. They shook once, firmly, and released, but the feeling of his hand lingered on her skin long after she'd left his office with signed agreements, a compensation check that would change her life, and the growing certainty that she'd just made either the best or worst decision of her life. Time would tell which. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation that made Emma's head spin. Patricia proved to be a formidable coordinator. Arranging shopping trips to boutiques Emma had only ever window shopped, consultations with a stylist who assessed Emma's wardrobe needs with the precision of a general planning a military campaign, and even a session with an etiquette expert who coached her on the finer points of formal dinner conversation. You're naturally gracious, the etiquette consultant, a dignified woman named Vivienne, told Emma during their second session. That's good. You don't need to be taught manners. You simply need to understand the specific cultural expectations of the Nakamura family. They blend traditional Japanese formality with Western high society standards. It's a unique combination. Emma absorbed information about proper bowing etiquette, how to navigate a traditional tea ceremony, which topics were appropriate for dinner conversation, and which to avoid. Her brain felt saturated with details, but she was determined to be perfect. Why are you pushing yourself so hard? Jessica asked one evening when Emma declined after-work drinks to review her notes instead. You're already the smartest person in the department. Because if I fail, I don't just lose $50,000, Emma thought. I lose his trust, his respect. And for reasons she couldn't fully articulate, that prospect bothered her more than the money. She and Alexander had 3 more preparatory meetings before departure. Each time, he was professional, thorough, asking her questions about her background that would need consistent answers if the Nakamuras inquired. They built a relationship backstory. They'd met at a company event 6 months ago, started dating quietly to keep it private, had bonded over a shared love of architecture and classical music. Do you actually like classical music? Alexander asked during their third meeting. I do, actually, Emma said. My father used to play Chopin when I was growing up. It was one of the few things that relaxed him. Something flickered across Alexander's face. Your file said your father passed when you were 15. I'm sorry. You have a file on me? Emma didn't know whether to be flattered or disturbed. I have files on all my senior employees, Alexander said. And you're about to spend a week in an intimate arrangement with me. Due diligence seemed appropriate. What else does this file say? That you graduated top of your class despite working 3 jobs to pay tuition. That your sister helped raise you after your father died. That you're loyal, hardworking, and talented. Nothing sinister, Emma, just facts that help me understand who you are. The idea that he'd researched her, cared enough about this arrangement to truly know who he was bringing into it, sent warmth through her chest. It wasn't personal interest, she reminded herself. It was thoroughness. Alexander Winters did everything thoroughly. But when he looked at her with those gray eyes, something in his expression felt personal enough to make her breath catch. 2 days before they were scheduled to leave for the Hamptons, Alexander surprised her with an unscheduled meeting request. Dinner, his email said simply. Tonight, 7 p.m., Paolo's. We need to practice being a couple in public. Paolo's was an upscale Italian restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place Emma had never been able to afford. She pulled out one of her new dresses, a deep green sheath that the stylist had insisted brought out her eyes, and spent an embarrassing amount of time on her hair and makeup. This is practice, she told herself as she applied lipstick for the third time. Professional preparation, not a date. But when Alexander rose from their table as she approached, his eyes traveling over her in a way that felt decidedly unprofessional, Emma's heart kicked against her ribs in a rhythm that had nothing to do with business. You look beautiful, he said simply, pulling out her chair. Thank you, you clean up well yourself. It was an understatement. Alexander, in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his eyes warm in the candlelight, was devastating. They ordered wine, made small talk about the menu, but Emma could feel the awkwardness between them. They'd been professional in his office, but this, sitting across from each other in a romantic restaurant with soft lighting and intimate atmosphere, felt different. We're terrible at this, Alexander observed after a particularly stilted exchange about the weather. Horrible, Emma agreed, laughing despite herself. If the Nakamuras saw us now, they'd know immediately this was fake. Then we need to fix it. Alexander leaned forward, his voice dropping. The problem is we're both too aware of the performance. We need to be comfortable with each other. Actually comfortable, not professional comfortable. How do we do that? We be honest. He took a sip of wine, considering. Ask me anything, something real not from our prepared backstory, and I'll do the same. We need to know each other well enough that talking isn't work. Emma thought about it, then took the plunge. Okay, why did you really build Winters Global, not the Forbes profile answer, the real one? Alexander smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. Because I was told I couldn't. My father thought tech was beneath our family's dignity. We were old money, very traditional. When I dropped out of Harvard to start the company, he cut me off completely. Said I'd crawl back within a year, begging for reinstatement. But you didn't. I didn't. I slept on a friend's couch for 2 years, lived on ramen and spite, and built something he couldn't dismiss. By the time Winters Global went public, my net worth exceeded his. His smile turned rueful. He never admitted I'd proven him wrong. He died 3 years ago, still disappointed in me. The pain in his voice was carefully controlled but undeniable. Emma reached across the table without thinking, her hand covering his. I'm sorry, that must have been hard. Alexander looked down at their joined hands, and for a moment Emma thought he'd pull away. Instead, his fingers curled around hers, thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that sent electricity up her arm. Your turn to be honest, he said quietly. Why did you really accept this arrangement, and don't say just the money? Emma swallowed. She could lie, keep it professional, maintain the distance that was safer, but he'd been honest with her. Because I'm tired of being invisible, she admitted. I've worked so hard, been so responsible, played by all the rules, and I'm still just a face in the crowd, drowning in debt, unable to take risks because I can't afford to fail. This was a chance to be seen, by someone who matters, to matter maybe, even if it's just for a week. The confession hung between them, more vulnerable than she'd intended. Alexander's hand tightened on hers. You're not invisible, Emma, not to me. The intensity in his eyes made her mouth go dry. This was supposed to be practice, professional preparation, but the way he was looking at her felt dangerously real. Their food arrived, breaking the moment, and they released hands to eat. But something had shifted. Their conversation flowed naturally now, no longer stilted. They discovered they both loved architecture, both preferred books to movies, both had complicated relationships with their families that shaped them in profound ways. By the time dessert arrived, tiramisu they shared with 2 forks. They were laughing like old friends. "Okay, we need to test the physical comfort level," Alexander said as they finished the wine. "Because right now we could be colleagues having dinner, not a couple." "What did you have in mind?" "Dance with me?" He stood, offering his hand, gesturing to where a few other couples swayed to soft jazz near a piano in the corner. Emma's heart hammered, but she placed her hand in his and let him guide her to the small dance floor. His arm came around her waist, pulling her closer than was strictly necessary for propriety. Her hand rested on his shoulder, feeling the solid muscle beneath expensive fabric. They moved together, finding a rhythm, and Emma became acutely aware of everywhere their bodies touched. His chest against hers, his breath stirring her hair, his hands splayed across her lower back, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. "This okay?" he murmured against her ear. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. It was more than okay. It felt perfect in a way that terrified her. "Look at me," Alexander said softly. She tilted her head back, meeting his gaze. His gray eyes had darkened, an intensity there that stole her breath. "When we're with the Nakamuras, I'm going to look at you like this," he said, his voice low and intimate. "Like you're the only person in the room, like I'm completely fascinated by you. Can you handle that?" "Can you?" Emma whispered back, the question escaping before she could stop it. Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe or recognition. His hand tightened on her waist. "I guess we'll find out," he said quietly. The song ended. They stepped apart. Alexander paid the check and walked her to where his driver waited to take her home. The professional distance reasserted itself, but the ghost of his hands on her waist lingered. "We leave at 8 a.m. on the 20th, he said as they stood beside the car. "Patricia will send you the details. Pack everything you'll need for a week. Remember, formal events but also casual sophistication for daytime." "I remember." Emma clutched her purse, unsure how to end this evening that had felt far more like a real date than practice. "Emma," his hand caught her arm gently. "Tonight, that was good. We're going to be fine." "Are we?" She searched his face. "Because that felt real, Alexander, and you're the one who said we had to keep it fake." He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb unconsciously stroking the inside of her wrist where he still held her arm. The touch sent shivers through her entire body. "We keep it professional," he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We remember the boundaries." "Right, the boundaries." Emma gently pulled her arm free, needing the physical distance to think clearly. "Good night, Alexander." "Good night, Emma." She slid into the car, and as it pulled away, she looked back through the rear window. Alexander stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. Even from a distance, the intensity of his gaze was palpable. Emma turned back around, pressing her fingers to her lips, and tried not to acknowledge what every fiber of her being already knew. She was in trouble. Deep, complicated, heartbreaking trouble. And they hadn't even left for the Hamptons yet. Part 2, The Hamptons Christmas. The morning of December 20th arrived with the kind of bitter cold that made New York City feel more like the Arctic. Emma stood in front of her apartment building at 7:45 a.m., 2 suitcases at her feet, watching her breath form clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. The street was nearly empty, just the occasional taxi splashing through slush and the distant rumble of the subway beneath her feet. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up precisely at 7:50 a.m. The driver stepped out, not Luca this time, but a different man, equally professional, equally watchful. He loaded her bags into the trunk with practiced efficiency while Emma slid into the warm interior. Alexander was already inside, phone to his ear, speaking in rapid Mandarin. He glanced up as she settled into the seat beside him, his eyes traveling over her burgundy wool coat and leather gloves with what might have been approval. He held up one finger, 1 minute, and returned to his conversation. Emma used the moment to study him. He wore a charcoal cashmere overcoat over a black turtleneck and dark jeans, somehow making casual look like a Milan runway. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it, and there was a tension in his jaw that suggested he hadn't slept well. Join the club, Emma thought. She'd been awake until 3 a.m., alternating between excitement and terror about the week ahead. Alexander ended his call and turned his full attention to her. "Good morning. Coffee?" He gestured to an insulated carafe and 2 porcelain cups in the console between them. "Please," Emma accepted the cup he poured, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "Mandarin this time." "Shanghai office. They're 8 hours ahead." He poured his own coffee, his movements economical and precise. "There's a situation with a supplier that needed immediate attention." "Do you ever stop working?" "Not often." A wry smile touched his lips. "Occupational hazard of being the person whose name is on the building." The car glided through the city streets, heading toward the Midtown Tunnel. Morning light was just beginning to break over the skyline, painting the buildings in shades of rose and gold. Inside the Merceds, the world felt insulated, private, like they existed in a bubble separate from reality. "Nervous?" Alexander asked, watching her face. "Terrified," Emma admitted. "What if I mess up, say the wrong thing, use the wrong fork?" "Then you'll be human and the Nakamuras will relate to you." He shifted slightly to face her more fully. "Emma, I didn't choose you because you're perfect. I chose you because you're genuine. That's what will sell this, not your knowledge of which fork to use." "Easy for you to say. You were probably born knowing proper etiquette." "I was born knowing which boarding school to attend and which country club to join," Alexander corrected. "Everything else I learned, just like you're learning now." The car emerged from the tunnel into the gray morning of Long Island, bare trees flanking the highway like skeletal sentinels. Traffic was light at this hour, and they made good time heading east. "Tell me about the Nakamuras," Emma said, pulling out the small notebook where she'd been keeping details. "Not the business stuff, the people. What are they actually like?" Alexander considered this, swirling the coffee in his cup. "Hideo Nakamura is 73, traditional but not rigid. He values honor, family, and long-term thinking over short-term gain. His wife, Yuki, passed away 2 years ago. They were married for 50 years, and he still wears his wedding ring." Emma's heart squeezed. "That's beautiful and sad." "It's one reason your relationship status matters to him," Alexander continued. "He believes in partnership, in building something with someone. He sees marriage as the foundation of stability. A man alone, in his view, is incomplete, unanchored." "What about their children?" "One son, Kenji, 45, brilliant, runs the technology division. He's more progressive than his father, but equally shrewd. His wife, Sakura, is lovely, warm, artistic, easier to talk to than you'd expect. They have 3 children. The oldest, Eiko, is 17 and apparently quite formidable." "Apparently." "I've only met her once briefly, but Kenji speaks of her with the same mixture of pride and terror most fathers reserve for brilliant daughters." Alexander's smile suggested he found this amusing. "Anyone else I should know about?" "Hideo's sister, Tomoko, will be there. She's 80, sharp as a blade, speaks perfect English, and sees through bullshit with terrifying accuracy. If anyone is going to call us out, it'll be her." Emma's stomach tightened. No pressure or anything. Alexander's hand found hers, his fingers lacing through her own in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "We're going to be fine. I trust you, Emma. Trust yourself." She wanted to point out that hand-holding probably wasn't necessary when they were alone in the car, with only the driver who couldn't hear them through the partition. But his touch was steadying, grounding, and she needed that right now. So she squeezed his hand back and watched the landscape change from suburban sprawl to the manicured estates of the Hamptons. The Nakamura estate was not what Emma had expected. She depictured something ostentatious, a massive mansion dripping with obvious wealth, the kind of place that screamed money. Instead, what greeted them as they passed through iron gates was a study in elegant restraint. The main house was a stunning fusion of traditional Japanese architecture and modern design. Clean lines, natural materials, floor-to-ceiling windows that brought the winter landscape inside. The grounds were immaculate despite the season, with carefully pruned trees, stone pathways, and a frozen pond that probably hosted koi in warmer months. "It's beautiful," Emma breathed as the car followed the curved driveway. "Wait until you see it lit up at night," Alexander said. "Hideo has a thing for lanterns. The whole property glows." They pulled up to the main entrance, where a small reception committee waited. Emma recognized Hideo Nakamura from the photos Alexander had shown her, a distinguished man with silver hair, sharp eyes, and an upright bearing that suggested military background. Beside him stood a younger man who had to be Kenji, and a petite woman in an elegant kimono who must be Sakura. The car stopped. Alexander squeezed Emma's hand once more, then released it. "Showtime," he murmured. He exited first, moving around the car to open Emma's door himself before the driver could. His hand extended to help her out, and Emma took it, grateful for the support as her heels found purchase on the gravel drive. Alexander's arm immediately came around her waist, pulling her against his side in a gesture that looked natural, protective, intimate. Emma's heart hammered, but she forced herself to relax into his touch, to tilt her head slightly toward him as if his presence was her natural anchor. "Hideo-san," Alexander said, his voice warm with genuine respect. He bowed, the gesture precise and appropriate. "Thank you for your hospitality." "Alexander." Hideo's face broke into a smile, and he returned the bow. "Welcome, and this must be the young lady we've heard so little about." There was gentle teasing in his tone, and Emma felt Alexander's arm tighten fractionally on her waist. "Emma Clark," Alexander said, the pride in his voice perfectly calibrated. "Emma, this is Hideo Nakamura, his son Kenji, and Kenji's wife, Sakura." Emma bowed, hoping she'd gotten the angle right. "It's an honor to meet you all. Thank you so much for including me in your celebration." "The honor is ours," Hideo said, his English accented but flawless. His dark eyes assessed her with the same sharpness she'd noted in the photos, but his smile remained kind. "Alexander has been uncharacteristically secretive about his personal life. We are delighted he's finally chosen to share it with us." "Emma values her privacy," Alexander said smoothly, his thumb stroking gently against Emma's hip in a gesture that looked affectionate but probably was meant to steady her. "As do I, but your invitation was too meaningful to decline." "Indeed," Kenji stepped forward, his handshake firm. "Welcome, Emma. I hope my father hasn't intimidated you too much." "Not at all," Emma said, finding her voice. "Though I admit I'm a bit overwhelmed by how beautiful your home is." Sakura's face lit up. "Oh, you're sweet. Come, you must be freezing. Let's get you inside. We'll have tea and I can show you to your accommodations." As they moved toward the entrance, Emma caught sight of an elderly woman watching from one of the windows. Even from a distance, the intensity of her gaze was palpable. Tomoko, Emma guessed, the aunt who sees through everything. They were ushered into a breathtaking entrance hall where traditional shoji screens blended seamlessly with modern art installations. The floor was heated, Emma realized as warmth seeped through her shoes, and the air smelled faintly of sandalwood and green tea. "Your guest house is prepared," Sakura said, gesturing toward the back of the property. "It's private, comfortable. I hope you'll find it suitable." "I'm sure it will be perfect," Emma said, catching Alexander's almost imperceptible nod of approval at her gracious response. "But first tea," Hideo insisted. "And we talk. I want to know about the woman who has finally captured Alexander's notoriously elusive heart." The words were light, but his eyes on Emma were anything but. This was the test, she realized. This first conversation would set the tone for everything that followed. They were led to a sitting room that managed to be both formal and inviting, with low tables, cushioned seating, and windows overlooking a snow-dusted garden. A tea service was already prepared, the porcelain delicate and clearly expensive. Sakura poured with practiced grace, while Hideo settled across from them. Alexander guided Emma to a seat, then sat close beside her, his thigh pressing against hers in a way that would look natural to observers, but made Emma hyper-aware of every point of contact. "So, Emma," Hideo began once everyone had tea. Alexander tells me you work in marketing at Winters Global. How did you two meet? This was the rehearsed story. Emma reminded herself. They'd practiced this. At a company event about 6 months ago, Emma said, keeping her voice natural, conversational. There was a product launch celebration. I spilled champagne on his very expensive suit. Alexander's laugh was perfectly timed. She was mortified. I was charmed. It's not often someone treats me like a human being instead of a title. I offered to pay for dry cleaning, Emma continued, warming to the story now. He asked me to dinner instead. I thought he was joking. She almost said no, Alexander added, his hand finding Emma's on the cushion between them, fingers interlacing. Thank God her curiosity won out over her common sense. The touch of humor, the self-deprecating charm, was perfectly pitched. Emma could see Sakura smiling, Kenji looking interested rather than skeptical. But Hideo's eyes remained sharp, assessing. 6 months is not long, yet you seem comfortable together. What is it about Emma that captured your interest, Alexander? This wasn't rehearsed. Emma felt Alexander's hand tighten on hers, a brief moment of tension before he answered. Her honesty, Alexander said, and something in his voice sounded almost too real. In my position, people tell me what they think I want to hear. Emma tells me the truth even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. It's, he paused as if searching for words, refreshing, essential. His eyes were on Emma as he spoke, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. Was he still performing, or had truth slipped into the performance? And you, Emma? Hideo turned his attention fully to her. What drew you to Alexander, his wealth, his position? It was a blunt question, almost accusatory, and Emma felt her spine straighten. But before she could formulate a diplomatic answer, something else rose up, genuine feeling, unexpected and undeniable. His loneliness, Emma said quietly. The room went still. Alexander's hand went rigid in hers. Emma continued, committed now to whatever truth was emerging. Everyone sees the success, the power, the confidence, but I saw someone who'd built something extraordinary and had no one to share it with. Someone brilliant who was tired of being alone. I recognized it because I felt the same way. The silence that followed was profound. Hideo's expression had softened, something like approval flickering in his eyes. Sakura had pressed a hand to her heart, clearly moved. And Alexander was staring at Emma with an expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise, certainly, but also something deeper, more complicated. Well, Hideo said finally, his voice rough with emotion. That is an answer I did not expect, and one I believe. He raised his teacup in a small salute. To finding someone who sees you truly, there is no greater gift. They all drank, the tea warm and slightly bitter on Emma's tongue. Under the table, Alexander's thumb stroked across her knuckles in what might have been gratitude or warning or something else entirely. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, their travel plans for the week, the schedule of events, Sakura's excitement about the traditional New Year's preparations. But Emma could feel Hideo's approval like sunlight, and she knew, somehow, that they'd cleared the first major hurdle. When the tea was finished, Sakura offered to show them to their guest house. They walked through gardens that were beautiful even in winter, past stone lanterns and sculpted evergreens, until they reached a structure that was more small villa than guest house. The main bedroom is upstairs, Sakura explained as she opened the door. There's also a study, a living area, and a full kitchen if you prefer privacy for meals, though we hope you'll join us often. This is incredible, Emma said, taking in the vaulted ceilings, the modern furnishings mixed with traditional art, the wall of windows overlooking a private section of the gardens. I'll leave you to settle in, Sakura said with a warm smile. Dinner is at 7 in the main house, casual dress, we'll see you then. When the door closed behind her, Emma and Alexander stood in the sudden silence, the weight of their week together settling like snow. Separate sleeping arrangements, Emma said, trying to break the tension. You mentioned that, so where are you actually staying? Alexander moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, that familiar thinking posture. Here. Here, but you said. I said separate accommodations, and we have them. There's a bedroom upstairs and a study down here with a daybed. I'll take the study." He turned to face her. "Emma, the Nakamuras will assume we're sharing a room. If staff see us going to different buildings, it raises questions. This maintains the illusion while respecting the boundaries." It made sense. It was practical. So why did Emma's heart sink slightly at the thought of him sleeping in a different room? "That answer about loneliness," Alexander said, his voice carefully neutral. "That wasn't in our script." "I know, I'm sorry, it just—" "Don't apologize." He crossed to where she stood, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "It was perfect. It was exactly what Hideo needed to hear. I'm just wondering where it came from." Emma swallowed, suddenly aware of how little space existed between them. It felt true. In the moment, it felt like something I would actually say if I actually cared about you. "Method acting," Alexander said, but his voice had gone rough. "Something like that." They stood there, the air between them charged with something dangerous. Alexander's hand lifted, almost against his will, brushing a strand of hair back from Emma's face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Emma," he said softly, and her name in his voice sounded like a warning and a plea. "Alexander," she whispered back. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, wanted him to kiss her with an intensity that shocked her. This wasn't part of the arrangement, wasn't part of the performance, was exactly what they'd agreed not to let happen. Alexander seemed to realize it at the same moment. He stepped back abruptly, his hand falling away, the careful distance reasserting itself. "We should unpack," he said, his voice back to business. "Dinner in 3 hours, I'll take the first shower." He grabbed his bags and headed upstairs without looking back, leaving Emma alone in the beautiful space with her racing heart and the ghost of his touch still burning on her skin. This was only day 1. They had 6 more days to go. And Emma was beginning to realize that Alexander's condition, the one about walking away clean when this was over, wasn't going to protect either of them from what was already starting to happen. Emma stood in the guest house bedroom, staring at her open suitcase, trying to remember how breathing worked. The room was stunning, all clean lines and natural materials, a massive bed with crisp white linens, sliding doors that opened onto a small private balcony overlooking the gardens. In warmer months, it would be paradise. Now, with snow beginning to fall softly outside, it felt like something from a dream. A dream she was having with Alexander Winters, sleeping 1 floor below. She could hear the shower running, the pipes humming through the walls, and her traitorous mind immediately conjured images she had no business imagining. Water streaming over his shoulders, steam rising his hands. "Stop it," Emma muttered to herself, forcibly redirecting her attention to unpacking. The stylist Patricia had hired had done an incredible job. Emma pulled out dresses she'd never imagined owning. A midnight blue cocktail dress with an asymmetric hem, a champagne-colored gown that shimmered like starlight, casual cashmere sweaters in jewel tones, tailored slacks that actually fit her properly. There were shoes, jewelry, even lingerie that made her blush despite no one being present to see it. "Appearances matter," Patricia had said firmly when Emma protested the expense. "You're representing Mr. Winters, you need to look the part." The part of a woman who belonged with Alexander Winters. A woman who could move through his world without looking lost. Emma hung the clothes carefully in the closet, her hands smoothing over fabrics that felt like luxury against her skin. The shower cut off below, and she heard Alexander moving around, the creak of floorboards, a cabinet opening and closing. They were living together, sort of, for a week, playing house while carefully maintaining the fiction that none of this meant anything real. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother, "Miss you, honey. House isn't the same without you. Stay safe with all that client work. Love you." Guilt twisted Emma's stomach. Her mother thought she was in Manhattan, working crazy hours for a demanding client. Not in the Hamptons, pretending to be in love with her billionaire boss. The lies were necessary, Emma reminded herself. The NDA she'd signed made them legally required, but they still tasted bitter. She texted back something generic about being busy but thinking of family, then set the phone aside. If she dwelled on what she was doing, the moral ambiguity of it all, she'd lose her nerve. A knock on the bedroom door made her jump. "Emma, I'm done with the shower. It's all yours." Alexander's voice through the wood, carefully professional. As if he hadn't been standing inches from her an hour ago, his hand on her face, looking at her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. "Thanks," Emma called back. "I'll be down in an hour." She gathered her things for the shower, toiletries, the deep green dress she'd chosen for tonight's casual dinner, fresh undergarments. The bathroom was as luxurious as everything else, all heated floors and rainfall shower heads and the kind of towels that felt like clouds. Emma stood under the hot water longer than necessary, trying to wash away the tension coiled in her shoulders, the awareness humming through her body, the growing certainty that she'd made a terrible miscalculation about her ability to keep this professional. It had been less than 12 hours. She shared exactly one tea ceremony and one moment of almost intimacy with Alexander, and already her carefully constructed walls were cracking. "Get it together," she told her reflection in the steamed mirror as she dried off. "This is a job, a very well-paying job. Don't ruin it by catching feelings for a man who's explicitly told you not to." She dried her hair, applied makeup with more care than usual, and slipped into the green dress. It hugged her curves without being obvious, the neckline modest but flattering, the hem hitting just above her knee. She'd learned in the last 2 weeks that true elegance wasn't about showing skin, it was about confidence. When Emma descended the stairs, Alexander was in the kitchen area, pouring himself what looked like whiskey. He'd changed into dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders, his feet bare on the heated floor in a gesture of casualness that was somehow more intimate than formal clothing. He looked up as she entered, and whatever he'd been about to say died on his lips. His eyes traveled over her slowly, thoroughly, in a way that made heat pool in Emma's stomach. When his gaze finally met hers again, the gray had darkened almost to smoke. "That dress," he said, his voice rough, "is dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Emma's heart hammered. "Dangerous to my concentration." He took a long drink of whiskey, as if needing the fortification. "You look stunning." "You're not supposed to notice," Emma said, moving into the kitchen because standing still while he looked at her like that was impossible. "We're business partners in this arrangement, remember." "Right, business partners." But the way he said it suggested he was reminding himself as much as agreeing with her. Emma busied herself with pouring a glass of water, needing something to do with her hands. "What's the plan for tonight?" "Just dinner with the family." Dinner, conversation, probably some subtle evaluation of our relationship dynamic. Alexander leaned against the counter, watching her. "They'll be polite about it, but make no mistake, we're being assessed." "No pressure or anything." "You did beautifully at tea. That answer about loneliness," he trailed off, shaking his head. "Hideo is a romantic underneath all that business pragmatism. You reached something in him." "I reached something in you too," Emma said quietly. "I saw your face when I said it. That wasn't performance." Alexander was silent for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "No," he finally admitted. "It was." "Do you want to talk about?" "No," the word was gentle but firm. "Emma, I meant what I said in my office. I'm not interested in examining my feelings or yours beyond what's necessary for this arrangement to work. What you said was effective. That's what matters." But the way he was looking at her suggested feelings were absolutely being examined, whether he wanted to admit it or not. Before Emma could push further, Alexander's phone chimed. He glanced at it, then straightened. "Car's here to take us to the main house. Ready." Emma nodded, grabbing her coat and the small clutch she'd brought for evening events. They walked through the gardens in companionable silence, their breath fogging in the cold air, snow crunching under their feet. The main house was lit up exactly as Alexander had described, lanterns glowing along every pathway, creating a scene of such beauty that Emma stopped involuntarily. "Told you," Alexander murmured, close enough that his breath warmed her ear. "Hideo doesn't do anything halfway." His hand found the small of her back, guiding her forward, and Emma tried to ignore how natural the gesture felt. How right. Inside the main house, they were greeted by Sakura, who led them to a more intimate dining room than Emma had expected. The table was set for 8, candles flickering in the center, the smell of something delicious wafting from the kitchen. "Just family tonight," Sakura explained. "Tomorrow the extended family arrives and things get chaotic. Tonight we wanted it to be special, a chance for everyone to get to know Emma properly." Kenji was already seated, along with the 3 children Emma hadn't met yet. The oldest, Eiko, was indeed formidable, 17 going on 30, with sharp eyes and her grandfather's assessing gaze. The twins, Hiro and Yuki, were 12 and seemed more interested in their phones than the guests. And there, in the seat at the head of the table opposite Hideo, sat Tomoko. The elderly woman was tiny, almost bird-like, but the force of her personality filled the room. She wore a traditional kimono in deep purple, her silver hair swept up in an elegant knot, and when her dark eyes landed on Emma, it felt like being scanned by an X-ray machine. "So," Tomoko said in unaccented English, her voice surprisingly strong, "this is the girl who has tamed the untamable Alexander Winters. Come here, child. Let me look at you properly." It wasn't a request. Emma felt Alexander's hand press against her back in encouragement before she moved forward, standing before Tomoko with what she hoped was respectful confidence. Tomoko studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then she reached out and took Emma's hands in her own, surprisingly warm and strong. "You have honest eyes," Tomoko pronounced. "And you're terrified, good. Only a fool wouldn't be intimidated by this situation." Despite herself, Emma smiled. "Is it that obvious?" "To me, yes. To others." Tomoko glanced at her nephew. "Perhaps not. You hide it well. That takes courage." She squeezed Emma's hands once more before releasing them. "I like you. Don't make me regret it." "I'll do my best," Emma said and meant it. Dinner was a revelation. Despite the formal setting, the atmosphere was warm, familial. Conversation flowed in English and Japanese, sometimes mixing both in the same sentence. The food was a fusion of traditional Japanese dishes and Western Christmas fare, sushi and prime rib, miso soup and roasted vegetables, sake and wine. Emma found herself seated between Alexander and Eiko, who proved to be as formidable as promised. "So you work for Alexander," Eiko said, her English perfect, her tone suggesting she saw through everything. "Isn't that complicated, dating your boss?" "Eiko," Sakura said warningly. "What? It's a valid question." The teenager turned her sharp gaze on Emma. "I'm applying to universities right now. They're all about workplace ethics and power dynamics, so I'm curious how you navigate that." Emma appreciated the directness, even if it was challenging. "Honestly, very carefully. We kept it private for months specifically because of those concerns, and Alexander has been adamant that our relationship exists separately from our professional dynamic." "How's that working out?" Eiko asked with a slight smirk. "It's a work in progress," Emma admitted, which got a genuine laugh from the girl. "I like her," Eiko announced to the table at large. "She's honest. Way better than that model woman you brought to the gala last year, Uncle Alexander. She couldn't answer a single question about anything except herself." "Eiko," this time it was Hideo, though his tone held more amusement than censure. Alexander, for his part, looked slightly embarrassed, an expression Emma hadn't seen before and found oddly endearing. "In my defense," he said, "that was not a serious relationship." "Unlike this one," Tomoko's voice cut across the table, sharp as a blade. The room went quiet. Emma felt Alexander tense beside her, his hand finding hers under the table, fingers interlacing in a gesture that might have been performance but felt like lifeline. "Unlike this one," Alexander said firmly, his eyes on Emma as he spoke. "Emma is different. This is different." The weight of his gaze, the conviction in his voice, made Emma's breath catch. Was he still performing? Or had truth slipped into the performance again, blurring lines that were supposed to stay sharp? Tomoko studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Good, because my nephew Hideo has built his life on partnerships. His business, his marriage, his legacy, all built with someone by his side. He won't entrust his family's future to a man who hasn't learned that lesson. "I understand," Alexander said quietly, "and I respect it." "Do you?" Hideo spoke now, his voice gentle but probing. "Because understanding intellectually and knowing it in your bones are different things. My wife and I built Nakamura Technologies together. Every major decision we made as one. When she died, I lost more than my partner. I lost half of my ability to see clearly." His eyes, when they landed on Emma and Alexander, held profound sadness and wisdom. "If you two are truly building something, hold on to it. Protect it. Because finding someone who makes you better, who sees things you miss, who balances your weaknesses, that is rarer than any fortune you could build." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the raw love in Hideo's voice, the devotion that transcended even death. Alexander's hand tightened on hers almost painfully. "I understand, sir," he said, his voice rough. "More than you know." The conversation moved on to lighter topics. The twins' school projects, Aiko's college aspirations, Kenji's frustration with a new technology rollout. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had just happened, some test they'd passed without realizing they were being examined. When dinner concluded, and they were walking back to the guest house through snow that had started falling more heavily, Alexander was quiet, withdrawn. "You okay?" Emma asked as they reached their door. He unlocked it, ushering her inside before answering. "Hideo's words tonight, about partnership, about building something real." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "This is supposed to be simple, a business arrangement, but nothing about this feels simple anymore." Emma set down her clutch, turned to face him fully. "Maybe that's because we're doing too good a job selling it, to them and to ourselves." "Maybe." He moved to pour himself another whiskey, then seemed to think better of it and left the bottle untouched. "Or maybe I made a mistake thinking I could control every variable, including human emotion." "Is that what you're feeling?" Emma asked, her heart hammering. "Human emotion." Alexander turned, and the look in his eyes stole her breath. "Emma, I've been feeling things since that dinner at Paolo's that I have no business feeling. Since you stood in that break room and challenged me instead of cowering. Maybe since I first read your work and recognized something exceptional." He moved closer and Emma's back hit the counter, trapped but not scared. Never scared of him. "But those feelings," Alexander continued, voice dropping to almost a whisper, "are dangerous. To the arrangement, to our professional relationship, to both of us. So yes, I'm maintaining distance, because the alternative is—" "What?" Emma challenged, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "What's the alternative?" "This." He kissed her. Not gently, not tentatively, but with months of denied tension exploding in a single moment. His hands framed her face, tilting her head back, his mouth claiming hers with an intensity that made her knees go weak. Emma's hands fisted in his sweater, pulling him closer, kissing him back with equal desperation. This wasn't performance, wasn't pretense, was real and raw and absolutely forbidden. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander pressed his forehead to hers, his hands still cradling her face like something precious. "We can't do this," he said, even as his thumbs stroked her cheekbones. "I know," Emma whispered. "This breaks every rule we set." "I know." "Emma," her name was a groan, a prayer, a curse. "What are you doing to me?" "The same thing you're doing to me," she admitted, her hands still twisted in his sweater. "Destroying my carefully constructed walls and making me feel things I shouldn't feel." Alexander pulled back just enough to look at her, his gray eyes stormy with conflict. "We have 5 more days. 5 days where we have to be convincing, affectionate, intimate. If we start this, if we cross this line, it's going to hurt like hell when the week ends." "Then maybe we don't let it end," Emma said, the words escaping before wisdom could stop them. "Emma." "I know the condition, the arrangement, walk away clean." She stepped back, forcing space between them even though every cell in her body screamed to close the distance. "You were very clear about the boundaries." "I was," but he looked as tortured as she felt. And I meant it. My life, my history, the reasons I don't do relationships, none of that has changed. Right, Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. So this was a mistake. We'll pretend it didn't happen. Can we? Alexander's laugh was bitter. Because I'm going to spend the next 5 days remembering exactly how you taste, how your hands feel twisted in my clothes, the sound you made when I kissed you. Heat flooded Emma's body at his words, at the desire still burning in his eyes despite his logical protests. Then what do we do? She whispered. We keep our agreement. Alexander moved deliberately toward the stairs leading down to his study. We maintain the performance in public, we keep professional distance in private, and when this week ends, we walk away exactly as planned. And if we can't? He paused at the top of the stairs, his hand gripping the railing with white-knuckled intensity. We have to, because the alternative destroys everything. Your career, my company, the deal with Nakamura, everything. So we're just going to ignore what just happened, pretend we don't feel this. We're going to remember why we're here, Alexander said, not looking back at her. And we're going to be professional, that's what professionals do. He descended the stairs without another word, and Emma heard the study door close with a finality that echoed in her chest. She stood alone in the beautiful guest house, her lips still burning from his kiss, her heart cracking under the weight of what she was feeling. This was day 1. 5 more days of pretending affection in public. 5 more days of maintaining distance in private. 5 more days of denying what had just become undeniable. Emma climbed the stairs to the bedroom that suddenly felt too large and too empty, and wondered how she was supposed to survive this when the man she was falling for was sleeping 1 floor below, armed with all the reasons they could never be together. And the worst part, he was right about all of it.